Ever fantasize about taking justice into your own hands? Like, I don't know, maybe you're stuck in traffic. Someone cuts you off.
Yeah.
And you think, if only I could teach them a lesson. Well, today we are diving into the world of vigilantism.
That's right. Where that fantasy slams right into reality.
It really does.
It's a lot more complicated than a comic book, that's for sure.
It is, and we've got a ton of research here.
Yeah.
A mountain of it.
Yeah.
All about how vigilantism has played out through history, how it gets twisted up in pop culture,
And of course,
the sticky ethical dilemmas it throws at us.
we're talking real-life cases, not just superheroes.
Right.
And you know what?
Yeah.
That line between good intentions and, like, actually doing harm,
Oh, yeah.
super blurry.
Yeah, right off the bat, we got to define what we're even talking about. Vigilantism, when you get down to it, it's about individuals.
Okay.
Deciding they're going to bypass the whole legal system, they're going to deliver what they see as justice.
So basically, playing judge, jury,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes executioner.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain appeal to that.
I get that.
You-
Yeah.
Like, who hasn't wanted to be Batman?
Oh, the lone wolf fighting for what's right. Yeah.
Exactly.
But let's pull up a case from our research here
Okay.
that kind of throws some cold water on that whole fantasy.
Right.
The shooting of Trayvon Martin
Oh, wow.
by George Zimmerman.
Right.
Zimmerman, he was a neighborhood watch volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
claimed self-defense, but for a lot of people it felt like, a
Yeah.
clear case of vigilantism
Yeah.
with absolutely devastating consequences.
Because Zimmerman appointed himself judge and jury that night,
Yeah,
and a young man lost his life.
that's right.
And that's a stark reminder that good intentions don't magically equal good outcomes.
Absolutely. And it makes us question, like, where does this urge even come from?
Yeah.
To take the law into our own hands, Well, one thing our research shows, it's not a modern invention.
I mean, really?
No. We're talking way back. Shays' Rebellion, late 1700s. American farmers were already rebelling against what they saw as an unfair system.
So is this like baked into our DNA or something?
What's interesting is Shays' Rebellion, it wasn't about, like, masked heroes.
Right.
This was a bunch of regular people.
Average Joes?
Yeah, pushed to their absolute limit.
Yeah.
They felt like the government wasn't on their side,
Interesting.
so they took up arms. It shows you, like, this urge to act when the systems fail. It's been around for centuries.
Yeah, but then you got groups like the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Talk about a chilling reminder that vigilantism can be used to uphold some truly horrific things.
Yeah.
Not exactly the hero image, is it?
The KKK, especially after the Civil War,
Hmm.
really shows how vigilantism can get twisted. It becomes a tool for terror.
An impression.
Yeah, oppression. Their whole idea of justice was rooted in, racism and hate. It's a dark side we can't ignore.
And speaking of dark sides, our research takes us to the Wild West.
Yeah.
Frontier justice, was it like a necessary evil
Right.
in a lawless land?
Yeah.
Or was it just a free-for-all for anyone with a grudge?
That's the whole debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
When there's no law, do people have a right to make their own?
Right.
One example that always stands out to me is the Montana vigilantes.
Okay.
They actually hanged a sheriff
Whoa.
who they believed was leading a gang of outlaws.
Oh, wow.
So were they heroes bringing order to the chaos?
Right.
Or were they just as bad as the criminals?
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to tell.
It's like, who even gets to decide who the bad guys are?
Yeah.
Right. And that takes us right into how pop culture portrays this whole thing. The whole vigilante thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we love a good vigilante story, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Batman, Dexter, taking...
It used to look so satisfying.
They make it look so good.
Oh, yeah. They tap into that, like, primal urge we all have
Yeah.
to see the bad guys get what they deserve.
Yeah.
And fast. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Hollywood is selling us a total fantasy. Our research is pretty clear on that.
Okay, so where does Hollywood go wrong? Spill the tea.
All right, first off, effectiveness. Batman
Yeah.
always gets his man.
Of course.
Real life.
Yeah.
Not so much. Our sources show real life vigilantism.
Yeah.
It's messy,
Right.
often ineffective.
Yeah.
Evidence is rarely perfect.
Right.
And vigilantes, they don't have the training, The
Yeah.
resources,
Right,
like
right,
the FBI or something.
right.
Real-world justice is way more complicated than just, throwing a punch and calling it a day.
Yeah, Batman never have to worry about filing paperwork.
Exactly. Then you got that whole moral clarity thing.
Oh, yeah.
Fictional vigilantes are driven by these pure motives.
Sure.
Saving the innocent, punishing the truly evil.
Right, right.
But in real life, things are way murkier. You got personal vendettas, biases, grudges.
It gets messy.
Oh, it gets real messy.
Yeah.
Muddies the waters.
Yeah.
Our sources even point to cases where, like, vigilantism is driven more by revenge than a desire for true justice.
So less about saving the world, more about settling scores.
Yeah, pretty much. And don't forget about the legal consequences. In the real world, good intentions won't keep you out of jail.
No.
No, comic book heroes don't get arrested.
True.
Real-life vigilantes.
Yeah.
They can end up behind bars.
Oh, wow.
Even if they think they're doing the right thing.
Really?
The law doesn't care about your cape and cowl.
So even if you're morally right, you can still be legally wrong. That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. The law isn't always about morality. It's about maintaining order, process.
Okay.
Now, there are some films that try to show, like, the more realistic side of vigilantism.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Taxi Driver, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
Really gets into the dark psychology of a guy who wants to clean up the streets, but his methods are brutal.
Right.
Ultimately lead him down a very dark path.
And then there's Blue Ruin. That one's not about, like, a superhero.
Right.
It's about a regular dude who gets caught up in this cycle of revenge. And the film does not shy away from the consequences.
Oh, wait.
It gets real messy, real fast.
Those films are a good reality check.
Yeah.
They challenge that whole romanticized image of the vigilante.
Yeah.
And they force us to confront those hard questions like,
Yeah.
is vigilantism ever justified?
Okay, that's where it gets really interesting, and I'm betting our listeners have some strong opinions on that one. What do our sources have to say?
Okay.
Are there any situations where taking the law into your own hands is, like, the right thing to do?
That's a question that's been debated for,
Yeah.
centuries, really.
Right.
And our research shows there are strong arguments on both sides.
Well-
It's a real ethical tightrope.
All right, let's walk that tightrope.
Okay.
What are the arguments for and against? Where does that line get drawn?
Well, on the one hand, you got the argument that when the system, like, utterly fails to protect the innocent
Right.
or deliver justice,
Yeah.
individuals might actually have a moral duty to step in.
To take things into their own hands.
Yeah. Imagine a world where, like, law enforcement is totally corrupt.
Okay.
The courts are rigged. Or maybe there's just no law at all.
Right.
Some would argue that in those, like, super extreme cases,
Yeah.
taking matters into your own hands isn't just, like, understandable.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do.
It's like that old saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. But who gets to decide when things are desperate enough to warrant going rogue? That feels pretty subjective.
That's one of the biggest problems with this whole line of thinking. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
What you see as, like, a minor inconvenience someone else might see as a life or death situation. And without any clear rules, it's easy for personal feelings, biases,
Wow.
even revenge to masquerade as justice.
And let's be real. If everyone gets to decide their own version of justice, I mean, that sounds like a recipe for chaos.
Exactly. That's the core of the argument against vigilantism.
Okay.
Even if someone's heart is in the right place, even if they genuinely believe they're doing good,
Yeah.
their actions,
Yeah.
they undermine the rule of law.
Okay.
It sets a dangerous precedent. It basically says, hey, anyone can decide when and how to enforce the law.
Right.
And that can lead to a complete breakdown of society.
Wow. So even a good vigilante can end up doing more harm than good in the long run, I mean.
Our research really emphasizes this point. Even morally justified vigilantism can have, like, negative consequences.
Yeah.
For society as a whole, it erodes trust in institutions, it fuels these cycles of violence, and it can ultimately lead to, more injustice, not less.
That's a really sobering thought. It makes you wonder about all those historical examples we talked about earlier, like those farmers during Shays' Rebellion.
Yeah.
They felt like they had no other choice but to take up arms, right?
Right.
But did that really solve anything in the long run?
It's debatable, honestly. Shays' Rebellion, it did force the government to,
Okay.
pay attention to the people's grievances.
Right.
But it also showed how easily vigilantism can, like, spiral
Yeah.
into violence and instability. It took years for things to settle down after that whole uprising.
And then you have the KKK, who use that idea of justice
Oh, yeah.
to justify their,
I know.
reign of terror.
It's a stark reminder that vigilantism can be, like, hijacked by the absolute worst elements of society.
Yeah. Their actions weren't just about, like, individuals taking the law into their own hands, right?
Yeah.
It was more about a group of people using violence and intimidation to, like,
And yeah,
enforce their own twisted ideology.
it's a perversion of justice, basically.
Totally.
Yeah.
Fueled by,
Oh, yeah.
racism and hatred.
Absolutely.
It makes you think twice about, I don't know, all those, like, romanticized portrayals of vigilantes in movies, TV shows.
Right. It really does. I mean, we all love a good superhero story.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But those stories often gloss over, like, the
Yeah.
real complexities of real-life vigilantism.
Yeah.
They rarely show the unintended consequences, the collateral damage, the innocent people who get,
Yeah.
caught in the crossfire.
It's like in the movies, the good guys always win.
Right.
The bad guys always get what they deserve.
Mm.
But in real life, it's rarely that clear-cut.
It's really not.
Good and bad can be pretty hard to define sometimes.
It can be.
And that line between them, like, blurry as heck.
You hit the nail on the head. And that brings us back to those films we mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Taxi Driver and Blue Ruin.
Yeah,
They stand out because they don't shy away from that ambiguity.
right. They show that dark side, the psychological toll it takes,
Yeah.
the unintended consequences that, like, ripple outward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver really delves into the mind of Travis Bickle.
Right.
Is this Vietnam vet
Yeah.
who becomes, like, increasingly disillusioned with the city's grime, the crime. He feels compelled to take action. Okay.
But his methods are,
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
And ultimately misguided.
He starts out wanting to clean up the streets, but ends up becoming part of the problem.
Pretty much.
Yes.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
Yeah. And then you have Blue Ruin,
Right.
which focuses on,
The consequences of revenge.
Yeah. The main guy, Dwight, he's not some, like, trained killer.
No.
He's a regular dude driven by grief and anger.
Mm.
And the film doesn't hold back in showing how his quest for vengeance just consumes him,
Yeah.
destroys everything around him.
It's a far cry from, like, those slick, stylish action heroes we see in most,
Yeah.
vigilante movies.
Right. It's a reminder that vigilantism isn't a game.
It's not. It's about real people making real choices.
Yeah.
And very real consequences.
So we've explored the arguments for and against. We've looked at the historical examples.
Right.
And we've seen how pop culture often gets it totally wrong.
But let's circle back to that initial question. Is there ever a situation where taking the law into your own hands is, like, justified?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
And honestly, our research doesn't offer any easy answers. It's a dilemma that, philosophers, legal scholars, they've been wrestling with this for centuries. But one thing is clear.
Yeah.
It's never a simple decision.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some of the pieces missing. There's always going to be that element of uncertainty, risk, unintended consequences.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to, like, approach this whole topic with nuance and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay, so no easy answers. But surely there's some key takeaways here.
Yeah, of
Or
course.
some things our listeners should, like, keep in mind
Yeah,
as they navigate this complex issue.
absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways for me is that vigilantism, even when it's driven by good intentions, it's inherently dangerous. It undermines, like, the very foundations of a just society.
Because if everyone gets to decide their own version of justice, then we're basically back in the Wild West. And as we've seen, that's not a world anyone wants to live in.
Not really.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
If vigilantism is so problematic,
Yeah.
what are the alternatives? How do we address the, like, root causes
Right.
that drive people to take the law into their own hands?
That's the question we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh,
We're
fun.
going to dig into the research on, like, potential solutions.
Right.
And we'll examine some real-world examples of communities working to create, a more just and equitable society.
I like it.
One where vigilantism is no longer seen as this,
Yeah.
necessary evil.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time kind of unpacking the dark side of vigilantism, right?
We have.
But our listeners, they're smart people.
Yeah.
They're probably thinking, if this is the symptom, what's the disease? And how do we cure it?
That's the big
That's
question.
what I want to get into now.
I'm glad you brought that up because our research doesn't just focus on the problems, you know?
Right,
It
yeah.
also looks at potential solutions.
Okay.
And one thing that comes up again and again
Yeah.
is this. Vigilantism, it often thrives where trust in the justice system
Yeah.
has just withered away.
It makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
if people feel like the system is rigged against them, that the cops aren't on their side, that the courts won't deliver justice well, they might feel like they have no other choice.
Pretty like they got to take matters into their own hands.
Right, exactly.
Our sources highlight some historical periods where this was especially true.
Okay.
Like, take the American West, those frontier towns.
Yeah.
Law enforcement was often scarce, unreliable, people felt vulnerable, isolated, like they couldn't count on anyone.
But themselves.
But themselves, exactly.
And so they basically had to become their own sheriffs, their own judges, their own,
Executioners.
executioners, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess even today, you kind of see that same sense of disillusionment in some communities.
Yeah.
Where people just feel like the system is failing them, that it's biased,
Right.
that it doesn't care about their problems.
And that's where the seeds of vigilantism can really take root. It's not just about punishing the criminals. It's about taking back control, asserting your own sense of justice, when you feel like no one else is listening.
So if we want to, prevent vigilantism,
Yeah.
we have to rebuild that trust.
Yeah.
But, how do we even do that?
Yeah, it's a complex challenge for sure. But our research, it points to a few key areas where we can make a difference. One is addressing the systemic biases
Okay.
that exist within the justice system itself.
You mean racial profiling,
Gray.
discriminatory sentencing, all that stuff.
Exactly. We need to make sure that the law is applied fairly,
Right.
equally,
Right.
to everyone, no matter their race, their income, their background.
Yeah, because if the system is seen as fundamentally unfair, people are going to lose faith.
Exactly.
And when that happens, they're more likely to look for,
Alternatives,
even dangerous ones.
Yeah. Another crucial piece of the puzzle, it's improving police-community relations. This has been a big focus of discussion lately.
Yeah, for good reason.
And for good reason. When there's a breakdown of trust between, law enforcement and the communities they serve, it creates this, breeding ground for vigilantism.
People need to feel like the police are there to protect them, not to harass them or intimidate them.
Right.
Or worse.
And that requires a shift in both attitude and approach. We need more community policing initiatives where officers are actively engaged with the people they serve. We need more transparency, more accountability when it comes to police misconduct.
It's about building bridges, isn't it?
It is.
Creating that sense of partnership between law enforcement and the community.
And that partnership can extend beyond just the police, too.
Okay.
We need to empower communities
to
take ownership of their own safety.
Okay.
This could mean supporting, neighborhood watch programs, but in a way that really emphasizes collaboration with law enforcement rather than vigilantism.
So it's not about, replacing the police. It's about working with them to create a safer environment for everyone.
That's exactly it. And it's also about addressing the underlying factors that contribute to crime in the first place.
Like what?
Things like poverty, lack of opportunity, social isolation. These can create environments where, crime's more likely to flourish.
So it's not just about catching criminals after the fact. It's about preventing crime from happening.
That's right. It's about investing in communities, providing resources, creating opportunities, and fostering a sense of hope.
Because when people feel like they have a stake in their community, when they feel valued and supported, they're less likely to turn to, crime or violence.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's not forget the role of the media in all this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The way crime is portrayed, in the news and movies, TV shows, it can have a powerful impact on our perceptions and our behaviors.
You mean how the news often sensationalizes crime, making it seem, way more prevalent, way more dangerous than it actually is.
Exactly. And how Hollywood often glamorizes these vigilantes, making them seem like heroes instead of, the flawed, dangerous individuals they often are in real life.
So we need more responsible reporting on crime, more nuanced portrayals of this whole vigilantism thing.
Yeah.
In entertainment.
In entertainment, yeah.
Oh.
We need to be critical of the stories we consume And the messages that they send.
Because those stories,
Yeah.
they shape our understanding of the world.
They do, yeah.
They influence our beliefs.
Absolutely.
They can even inspire our actions.
Yeah, it's about being aware, being informed, being engaged.
It is, yeah.
And ultimately addressing the root causes of vigilantism.
Yeah.
It's about creating a society where everyone feels safe,
Right.
respected, and empowered.
A society where the justice system is truly just.
Yeah.
Where communities are strong,
Right.
resilient, and where people feel like they have a voice.
It's a tall order, I know, but it's a goal worth striving for.
Well, I think that's a powerful note to end on. You know, we've explored that dark side of vigilantism.
We have.
But we've also kind of glimpsed a path.
Yeah.
Towards a brighter future.
A future where justice isn't something we take into our own hands, but something we build together.
Right.
You know, brick by brick, through dialogue.
Collaboration.
Yeah.
And a commitment to the rule of law.
It's the only way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of vigilantism. It's been a thought-provoking journey, to say the least.
It has, and I hope it's left our listeners with a deeper understanding of this complex issue and a renewed commitment to building a more just and equitable society.
We'll be back next week with a whole new stack of sources and another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.